Okay, so this is HRM, and I just want a brief outline of what I talked about in the lecture and what we're going to be talking about in the seminar. So this is your screencast. So those are my details, which are also available on Blackboard. And I wanted to say, I have said this a number of times, don't just read the textbook, okay? You should be reading a range of sources, and everyone's taken out the storybook, it appears. So I want to say is that, people that have taken out Story's book, Human Resource Management and Critical Text, put it back into the library, please, and then I'll withdraw your reservation as well, and then people can photocopy relevant chapters each week. But I'm going to be using different books, so there's no point in taking out one book anyway. It's better just to photocopy different books. So anyway, I think the two key books I'm going to be using are Story's book and Karen Legg, which is a bit more tricky to read. I may also be using Boxall and Purcell a bit. So I brought up the assignment. I'm going to give you the details for that in a couple of weeks, but that's going to be testing your knowledge of basic concepts in week 7. And there's obviously the exam. One question from section A, one from section B. And I've brought up these issues with having a Mac and doing 2 versions of the lecture, and that's also why I'm doing the screencast. So in terms of participation, I wanted to emphasize this key skill of persuasive argument, of you developing your own perspective on issues in human resource management and giving reasons to support your argument. And in a sense, that's what I do in the lecture. But that's what we'll be doing in the seminars, and so it's important you bring your clickers, and it's important you develop your own opinion and perspective and try to argue for it. So we'll be doing the seminars, as I said. What is human resource management then? That was the theme of the lecture. It has different definitions. Fairness is often associated with fairness, and HRM is also associated with performance, but I brought up some tricky issues around measurement there. Human resource management has many definitions. Story points out that in some instances it refers to any approach to employment management, and in others it refers to a more specific form of management. So it means different things in different contexts then. And that's a definition he gives from 95. And for Story, it has 4 key elements. Human resource management post its emergence in the 1980s. It consists of beliefs and assumptions. And I brought out a tension here between commitment and control. Okay? If commitment is about shaping individual desires to conform to an organisation, which is another way of, people's desires need to be shaped if they're going to be fully committed to an organisation, if you like. There's a problem, because that could be seen simply as a more insidious form of control, as Barker argues in the Administrative Science Quarterly piece that's on your PowerPoint slides, which I've included on Blackboard. And he looks at some small teams, and he looks at how these norms or behaviour patterns are instilled more strongly in small groups by internalising these kind of norms, these expected patterns of behaviour, than if, say, people are just being told what to do. And he calls this a kind of iron cage. So I'm going to play you a clip now with the Martin Luther King piece. So I'll play this. I'm going to play you the more serious clips in full on the screencast to get you to think for the seminars. And an issue that's brought up here, which is between this idea that if we emphasise this notion of commitment too much, then the problem is people simply then don't feel able to question an organisation. And this idea of psychologically training people to be committed to an organisation can be considered actually quite dangerous. And there's a clip from a Martin Luther King speech at the end, which brings out some of these problems.
Marcuse challenged that social world, and he said that's a world that should not be adapted to. And in fact, what the individual was adapting to was corrupt and evil. the ideal level, not at the sickness of human beings in it. And if people did not challenge that, then they were, in fact, submitting to evil. Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in psychology. It is the word maladjustment. It is a ringing cry in modern child psychology. Maladjusted. Now, of course, we all want to live a well-adjusted life in order to avoid neurotic and schizophrenic personalities. But as I move toward my conclusion, I would like to say to you today, in a very honest manner, that there are some things in our society and some things in our world which I'm proud to be maladjusted. I call upon all men of goodwill to be maladjusted to these things until the good society is realized. I must honestly say to you that I never intend to adjust myself to racial segregation and discrimination. I never intend to adjust myself to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few, leave millions of God's children smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society.
Okay. Then I talked about strategic qualities a bit, and this idea of strategy and integrating strategy with human resource management. So seeing HRM as a key part of strategy and focusing on ideas like, action, motivation, and goals. So that's that idea of an integrated strategy. Also, I brought this issue of the importance of line managers. That's a manager who works with people and their role in fostering human resource management. Then I played a clip from The Office, which I won't play again, but you can find it online if you're interested, because it's more intended to be comical. So there's this issue of how line managers might motivate and get closer to employees. Key levers then was the next aspect, the fourth aspect: managing culture, integrated action, devolved responsibility, and empowerment. There was also an issue about how, in terms of integrating culture, the culture might need to be changed to sort of foster a better relation with the customer. And then I included a clip from Jerry Maguire there, which I won't play again. But there's a difficulty here, there's a tension, because the Hay Group, for example, define human resource management through an emphasis on global competition, customer focus, and this need for speed and flexibility. But the problem with this idea of speed and flexibility is that it can be potentially lead to sort of more workers' insecurity, people working longer hours, lower wages, and in managers being finding it easier to sack people. And I want to say that there can be dangerous consequences. And then I brought out this idea of fairness, that, can too much flexibility lead to unfairness? There we go, a fair day's work for a fair day's pay, and we'll be talking about that in the seminars. So I talked about John Chambers at Cisco, who hasn't had a great deal of success, but gets paid over $18.5 million. Then we looked at some child miners in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they're expected to extract coltan from mines in dangerous conditions, and they risk their lives, and they get this coltan, and that's a key part of the manufacture of mobile phones, like for Nokia and other companies. And these children are paid as little as £1.50 a week. And then I looked at 0 hours contracts in the UK and the Resolution Foundation report. And this idea of workers living in a state of almost permanent uncertainty, as the Foundation report describes it.